Yeah, so I'll start with April. So first things first, I should let everybody know that I covered March the other day. If you were watching yesterday, you'll have just finished watching me cover March, and you know that in March we got demonetized. Very fun, fantastic thing to happen. Always great way to grow your business is for YouTube to demonetize you. And March and April, March didn't end any better, and April didn't start any better because YouTube decided to, let's put the cherry on top of that delicious cake and banned us from YouTube from a week. If you remember, do you remember
which video was
that? Of course, yeah.
I don't remember exactly which video it was that did it. I think we just got a notification through.
Oh, it was out of the blue. There wasn't a specific video.
Oh no, was it not the one that was to do with the Republican ad and the gun?
We got a strike for that, and then they randomly demonetized us, but we were actually being quite good. We didn't get 3 strikes. We just had the one, and they demonetized us anyway.
And then they decided, you won't be able to upload anything onto YouTube for a week anyway. So there you go.
Yeah.
What are you going to do about it? Nah. That's the kind of response that we got from YouTube.
Susan herself said those exact words.
I don't think it was Susan. I think it was Neil. Neil Mohan, the guy who took over.
The Indian who took over.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Raja Mohan. Have you not heard his glorious theme tune?
No.
I'll have to show that to you.
I thought you were going to sing it to me. Oh.
I don't think I could do it justice. Yeah, so that was really fun. But outside of what exactly happened to us, what happened in April? Well, as far as I can tell, most of the news stories this year have been the same news stories going on over and over again. I mentioned this for March, which is that there's been repeats of the same stories repeatedly developing, moving along with some twists and turns. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about will kind of be variations on a theme. Or
it's almost like there's continuity between cause and effect of all aspects of life.
True, but I would also put it in another way, which is nothing ever happens.
Well, that's not true.
Nothing ever happens. Say it with me, folks.
This is happening right now.
Well, I have certainly never felt like I covered the same thing over and over on this podcast.
I know. I don't know what you're talking about then, but it can be a bit like Groundhog Day. But good news does occasionally happen, and you know that good news has happened because awful places like the Human Rights Campaign reports on it like it's a bad thing. Well, I mean, they give themselves nice big names like the Human Rights Campaign.
I agree with you entirely. It's just funny to say these terrible people. From now and forevermore name myself as the good guy. And anything that I do must therefore be only in favor of good things because I am the good guy. Stunning and brave.
There you go. Exactly. If I ever trip an old lady down a set of stairs.
You did it for good reasons.
Yeah, it was a good thing.
She had it coming.
That old lady's name was Adolf Hitler.
Always is. So this is something that was dropped in the document to remind me that it happened. But Florida Senate passed an extreme gender-affirming care ban. I assume you know about this.
Yeah, there was that and about 18 other states. They had variable restrictions. Some banned puberty blockers, some banned the surgeries, some banned the whole lot. Florida was one of the more restrictive ones, thankfully.
Yeah, so good news happened. Then some bad news happened. And you dropped this one in here. Sorry,
I did.
We've got,
you did this. I started the war in Sudan.
It was me, Barry.
You did it just so we'd get news to cover, didn't you? You bastard.
Hey, I'm helping out here. I'm pulling my weight.
There you go.
Starting an entire war. Civil war. Civil war.
Great news, guys. Not great news, but it's great for the news. So what happened in Sudan, Josh? Explain it briefly for us.
There was a civil war. That's what happened. Basically, their country had been run appallingly. They'd recently moved out of sort of dictatorship situation, had some sort of sham democracy for a while, but they mismanaged it, put loads of price caps on, removed the price caps. Goods prices went skyrocketing, people couldn't survive, and then the military said, we're going to take over because you can't do it properly. But you can watch my video on it, as Harry has pulled up right here. And then it'll also be fresh in my memory because I just looked into it, whereas this is many months later and I don't remember.
I, for one, am absolutely shocked there would be civil war and political instability in a North African country.
It's never happened.
Where's General Mosquito Spray when you needed him?
It's never happened ever once. But one of the big things that also happened in April was the big cancelling of Andrew Bridgen. And he came on to the podcast to have an interview with Carl. that was the whole thing. It didn't go up on YouTube, so I probably can't discuss exactly what they discussed in there. But if you go on Rumble, which you should instead of YouTube, because YouTube despises us and hates you as well, Rumble will actually allow us to put up interesting videos.
Carl and I also did a long form hangout covering all of the lead up and the fallout before Andrew was kind enough to come in and talk to us. So you can catch up on the story with that if you want all of the articles and nonsense surrounding it.
And you can watch this video, and it's very interesting. It still stands up. It's mostly an interview. And this, I think, was the first time Andrew came on and introduced the world to his glorious hairy chest. So thanks very much for that, Andrew. Josh also covered that, I think this can be said on YouTube.
It can now, yeah.
Yes, it can be said on YouTube, that masks were a bad idea.
Yes, well, there was
Obviously.
a large meta-analysis that looked at the harmful effects of mask wearing. So obviously there had been research and things like that, but the value of a meta-analysis is obviously much greater than that of an individual study, because it looks at studies and accommodates for potential methodological issues. And so this was actually quite an important thing, and it was quite harrowing, actually, what they had said about it.
There's bits in there about possible contributions to causes of death through restricting breathing, wasn't there?
Yes, it was talking about your ability to oxidize your blood and things like that, and how
this was
provably worse. And
this was for surgical and N95 masks. I think
was.
you pointed out, but
N95 were worse.
were in fact, because they're more effective at restricting particles, they're also more effective at restricting breathing.
And it was just more of a comment on wearing masks more generally. I think it's probably not the best. I mean, even if you were doing so in a trade unrelated to, the COVID times, it's just something to bear in mind, I suppose.
There was also a subsequent study by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Lancet, on those far-right outlets, that turned around and said, we looked at every single state's policy in the US, and we found that social distancing and mask wearing had no relation to overall fatality rates. And they said that only the vaccine lowered deaths relating to COVID-19.
Good thing he invested all that money in the vaccine.
Yeah, exactly. But
So-
it's nice to know that, we're conspiracy theorists months after saying the exact same thing that they were saying.
So Bill Gates is going to give money to all of those people whose lives he negatively affected by petitioning the government to lock everything down early, right?
Nope.
Oh, fantastic. Donald Trump was being indicted at this point, right? I know that you may think, isn't he still being indicted? Yes, he is. At the time of recording, he is still being indicted for various election denial across various states in the US. This time, it was for the Stormy Daniels situation. I don't think this one went anywhere.
No, it was a bit of a ridiculous one in the first place.
It's still technically ongoing. So
it's still,
yes,
it's still technically ongoing.
Even though not Michael Avenatti, who is his lawyer? Oh dear, the one that went to prison. Totally off the top of my head. But he already went to prison for perjuring himself and lying to Congress. He wrote the letter saying that he had paid Stormy Daniels off with money without Trump's say-so or knowledge. And there was, if it was predicated on the idea that Trump didn't want the story about him sleeping Stormy Daniels out ahead of the election, there was like a 2008 People magazine article that already exposed it. So it was already public knowledge. But he's still indicted anyway.
Wasn't this the one where Trump was talking about Shark Week? And how he just came around and said how good Shark Week was.
Yeah, he slept with her. It didn't last very long, and he just put Shark Week on, and he sat around and made her watch it.
Big if true.
Unfathomably based. Yeah, so once again, Trump constantly being indicted. The actual charges themselves don't really matter all of that much, because they will literally pull up anything and everything, as this case demonstrated.
Michael
try and
Cohen,
get rid of
lawyer. Sorry.
Yeah.
Hey.
There you go. They'll literally get up that he gave Stormy Daniels some money at one point, so we should try and get him for that, boys. Let's see if we can try and put him in prison for that. So far, they're not doing that great a job with all of these indictments. So if things have changed by the 27th of December when this goes out, be interesting to see, I suppose. There was also basic bitch wokeness going on, as there always was. This was when the big Dylan Mulvaney Buzz Light thing came about.
Buzz Light.
I know, I'm not doing very well.
What year is it?
Bud Light came out with their marketing campaign that included Dylan Mulvaney, and they always... What?
Buzz Light to infertility and beyond.
Oh, for God's sake.
I'm here all week, folks.
This was a fun one because, I mean, I was honestly very skeptical of the big conservative campaign against this when it first came out, mainly because of the fact that go woke, go broke seems to have diminishing returns a lot of the time. You'll see somebody come out and say, go woke gets broke, and it doesn't actually, because a lot of these companies like Budweiser are owned by gigantic conglomerate corporations that own a lot of different brands, and nothing really affects their bottom line. But Anheuser-Busch did actually get a bit of a knock from this one, and did actually have to come out and apologize. I think the woman who was in charge of this campaign ended up getting fired.
So did some other guy as well that was involved in it.
The one thing I'm happy about is Bud Light more generally is just gross, and it couldn't have happened to a worse beer, which makes me happy.
Yeah, I think that's one of the largest cultural effects that's come off of the back of this, which was that Bud Light, which is already a terrible beer, as you're pointing out, don't drink light beers. That's
even
wrong.
Budweiser in general shouldn't be your first go-to.
I chipped my tooth opening a Budweiser once, so
that,
I've got a personal vendetta against
there's
it.
a moral here.
There is a moral here, which is don't be an idiot. If the bottle is a screw-on, don't try and open it with your mouth. But
You did impress the girl, though. Well done.
I did impress the girl, and now we're engaged, so that's all right.
So maybe do drink Budweiser.
No, don't do that. But Bud Light has a big stigma against it now. Everybody thinks you're gay if you drink it. Everybody
That is
already
true.
should have thought.
It actually makes you.
It
I think
actually,
As Phil
when they
Labonte
say they were
once said-
born this way, it's actually because the mothers drank Bud Light while they were pregnant.
I'm going to credit Phil Labonte with this joke of saying you can now go to a cocktail bar, order a round of fruity cosmopolitans, and the one guy that drinks Bud Light looks gayer because at least your one's fruity and tasty. That looks gay and it tastes like it sucks.
it's fruitier now.
Sorry to interrupt the video, but I thought I'd announce that we have a new line of merch. This is our aesthetics collection. So I was thinking that in the face of AI art debasing the very concept of art, actually we'd do something quite positive. So we commissioned a series of paintings that were actually really beautiful and could be something that we could present outside of politics. So for example, we have this magnificent painting of a ship weathering a storm, which I thought was just really nice. And we have, of course, a glorious, sort of surrealist, giant white tiger drinking from a lake. But also there are other things that are just kind of interesting, such as the chap lost in cyberspace, or something that I thought might, in time for Christmas, make a great present for your mum or something like that, a beautiful cat lounging on some clouds. Basically, we wanted to do some stuff that wasn't just political, so things that were just nice and beautiful and interesting, because that's also a part of the world we want to curate. So you can go over to shop.lotuses.com. Buying the merch is a really great way of supporting us and means that we can live past demonetization. And I'm sure they make great gifts for the folks as well.
There you go. Disney also hilariously had footage of a shareholder meeting released where all of the shareholders rang in to say, why are you making all of your programs terrible now? Why are you making them really woke? You're losing me money. Please stop doing this.
And then one of the women said that I'm surprised you're letting my not-so-secret gay agenda and putting queerness everywhere just go.
That was
Stop.
last year, I think.
Was it really?
Yeah, that
Wasn't it the same shareholder meeting?
No, there've been a few shareholder meetings. This was a public shareholder meeting
Right.
where the plebs like you or I, who may have bought some shares for Disney in the past, got to call in and say, listen, guys, I've been watching She-Hulk. I don't think I'm getting my value for money. Seemed to be the primary thrust of what was being discussed in that. And also we discovered that Cleopatra was in fact not black. As much as Netflix wanted you to know, I think this is when the trailer came out. The series for Netflix hasn't since come out and was trashed by a lot of people. It included a classics scholar called Shelley Haley saying that her grandmother told her, I don't care what they tell you in school. Cleopatra was black. Presumably that's what got her degree.
I believe that it was me and Stelios that covered this, and I remember saying Cleopatra would have looked something like Stelios in that she was Greek. But
Well, she was-
people misinterpreted it to mean Cleopatra
Looked like a
literally
man.
looks like Stelios.
Well, they've done computer generated reconstructions of her face, and she was actually, from what we can tell,
Pretty mid.
I
Pretty
think she
med,
was all
did
right.
you say?
Mid or med.
I think she was all right. She was pale skin, gingerish hair, blue eyes.
It's not exactly sub-Saharan African, is it?
No, not exactly. I don't think this was a particularly accurate representation of her. Interestingly enough, though, in recent news, there's been an announcement of a BBC Two documentary with Tom Holland and other people in it on Julius Caesar, where they're trying to paint him as the most dangerous evil man ever because he painted, he provided the template for all future dictators going forward.
There had been dictators before him.
But Julius Caesar and Donald Trump have so much overlap that we've got to demonize him. Don't question the veracity of that statement.
I don't remember Donald Trump's conquest of Gaul, but there we go.
He's not yet also been murdered by a cabal of his own advisors, but we'll see.
Well, the Roman Senate.
Well, the Roman Senate, but we'll see. Shelley Haley is also appearing in that, so I think we can immediately discount any quality information that might be included.
I don't know who that person is. Yeah,
she's the one who I mentioned who said, "I don't care what they tell you." Cleopatra was black.
The same person that thought the smoke alarms in the pyramids were chirping.
Yes. Elon Musk had his famous struggle session with the BBC. This is something that's still basically going on, not necessarily with the BBC, but this idea that Twitter is a hive for hate speech because Elon has opened it up to allow for a greater freedom of speech on there. It's not perfect. Alex Jones and other people still aren't allowed on the platform, more for Elon's personal reasons than anything else. But Elon, in most recent news, has been confronted with the fact that a lot of advertisers have dropped out of the platform and have said that we don't want to be on here as long as you're promoting free speech. And Elon said, okay, if you're going to try and blackmail me, then go F yourself.
Yeah, he's also bringing a lawsuit against Media Matters for trying to manipulate the algorithm to misrepresent the number of ads that are put alongside undesirable content to try and pressure advertising to boycotting Twitter. And he said, okay, you're damaging my brand, you're not being honest, we're going to sue you.
And fair play, we'll hope that actually goes somewhere, because I've mentioned before, even if Elon isn't completely on our side or isn't completely perfect on everything, he is probably the person who's most secure with his finances to be able to go after these gigantic corporations that bully people using advertiser pressure, especially because, as I covered recently, Elon Musk is actually heavily, the US government is heavily dependent on Elon Musk using SpaceX and other developments, technological developments that he's putting forward for NASA, for weapons development, that he produces, I think, greater value for them than Lockheed Martin and Raytheon. So they're really dependent on him. So if he's the one who's able to put these financial and legal challenges to these companies, he's probably the only person who has the power to do so.
I think he's the kind of person who the phrase "F you money" was invented, because he quite literally said that to the CEO of Disney.
Yes, he did.
And he will face very little financial recompense for that, I think.
Yeah, but this was an earlier example of his defiance to this, because it was the pathetic, embarrassing, feminine, cuckolded BBC reporter saying, well, I've been going on the platform and on my feed has been far more full of hate speech than it ever was before. And Elon says, can you give me a single example of that? And he immediately backtracks and says, well, actually, I haven't been going on my feed at all. No, I can't give you a single example of that. I mean, we already knew the BBC was liars, but it was really funny to see the BBC release an interview where it was made clear to everybody just how dishonest they all are.
If he wasn't such a big name, they probably wouldn't have released it, I don't think.
Yeah, this was a funny one as well. Does anybody remember this guy?
Yeah, the guy that spoke in the intonation of
State House
have a dream
closed.
speech. Yes.
Yeah, pool is closed. This was at Tennessee when some disruptive activists, one of whom was trying to style himself as MLK mixed with Malcolm X, they interrupted proceedings at the Tennessee State House. So they got ejected from the Tennessee State House.
He's like evil Calvin Robinson.
Alternate universe Calvin Robinson. And they tried to paint it as a big civil rights issue. This didn't really go anywhere, but it was funny at the time. Big business was still trying to import in billions of Africans.
We've been told this is a conspiracy theory, actually, haven't we?
I've been told from good sources that we're a conspiratorial outlet.
Mm.
So even when we include links to our sources and provide footage of business leaders, I think this is the gentleman who runs Next, is it?
I can't remember.
He runs some large company that's reliant on cheap labor to run its shops and distribution centers. And he says, we need more skilled labor. We need to keep the borders open for as long as possible so that I can keep those wages down. He didn't say that last part out loud,
The boss
So
of
that's
Next
why.
was lobbying for that, as was the boss of Tesco on Question Time around the same time. And the boss of the guy that owns Barrett New Build Homes obviously wants more people, more Dinos,
I mean,
so he can endlessly build.
They're all interchangeable corpos, so I'm not going to say exactly which one this was, but that's still a problem. Still a problem. And speaking of immigration and us being completely conspiratorial, this is when I did this particular segment, which is, at the time of recording, got us noticed by Talk TV.
Yes.
Because...
my former employer.
Yeah. Because on one of the shows, which show was it?
Ian Collins' show.
Ian Collins' show. A caller called in to say that he'd watched our show and found through the reporting that I'd done on this one that the need for immigration was being inflated because of the unemployment statistics and the employment statistics and the job statistics saying, well, we've got all of this employment, everybody's employed, and yet we've still got all of these job roles that need filling. So we're going to need to get more and more people in. And through this was a report that I did. I think the article that I was using was from Mashable, although it's also been reported by other outlets like Indeed, the primary job listing website for the UK. I think it was a company called Clarify something or other. You can check the sources on the podcast originally. They had found that about 43% of hiring managers said that they were keeping open their job listings indefinitely so that they could try to make it look like the companies were growing in periods of economic hardship and try to motivate their own staff members who wouldn't work as hard if they knew that no hope was on the horizon. And apparently, saying such a thing and listing sources and sources that were being used by outlets like Indeed was enough for, what was his name again, Ian Collins?
Ian Collins, yes.
To say that we are conspiratorial. Also, this was some pretty big news at the time, and still is, really. This was the month when Tucker Carlson got ousted from Fox News. I forget the exact reasons, but overall, this has proven to be a complete disaster for the network, as far as I can tell, because for me and a lot of other people, Tucker was the only person drawing us to that. And I didn't even tune into the network. You'd see the clips being posted on social media every so often, and he would cover something interesting, say something interesting. This drove that massive audience that they were getting away and drove it straight to Twitter, because now he's got his Twitter show and he's been covering some very interesting things. And as always, speaking to some very interesting figures. He's been speaking to Candace Owens recently. Most recently, in fact, I saw he did an interview. I don't think this was on his show, but independently, he did an interview for Dave Smith, where they spoke about some rather controversial subjects, and even the two of them were defending people like Pat Buchanan and other people who have got very controversial in the mainstream, but otherwise very sensible views. And I even saw Tucker saying something that some may find quite spicy, which was he was questioning some of the starting myths about World War II, for instance, where he's pointing out that Britain started the war to defend Poland, but then 16 days after we started war with Germany because they invaded Poland, the Soviet Union invaded the east of Poland, and we didn't do anything about that. So I don't think that's the sort of discussion he would normally be able to have if he was still attached to a network like Fox News, rather than being independent as he is now with Twitter. So I think overall it has been very good news that Tucker has been able to have more freedom and to signal boost some very interesting stories that he otherwise wouldn't have. And finally, the S&P almost collapsed. We were almost there, guys, because there were some big internal investigations going on into the finances of the organization, because a lot of money seemed to be being placed and then vanishing, and then Humza Yousaf took over. So the Islamification of Britain continues, gentlemen. And that was April.
If you appreciated that episode from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to check out the merch store and see mugs like this. Upon the conduct of each depends the fate of all. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Twitter at lotuseaters_com on Twitter. Thank you and goodbye.